Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of the newspaper analysis from the civil service examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Daily edition dated 16th May 2023. The important topics which are to be discussed have been displayed on your screen and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. So now let us start our today's session. So this topic has appeared at text and the context page, and this topic deals with the sexual harassment at workplace. The topic reads on sexual harassments at the workplace. Now, as far as the UPSC scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic finds its main relevance under General Studies Mains Paper 2 section of Social Justice. However, if you have the good knowledge of this particular act, this topic can also be used by you in GS paper 4, that is in ethics, in case studies, as well as in GS paper 1 in the section of society. So basically it is a general topic and can be used by you in almost every paper. Per se, as per the syllabus, this is under General Studies Mains paper 2. The immediate context in which this news article has appeared in today's The Hindu Daily edition is that 10 years after the Sexual Harassment of the Women and Workplace Act 2013, which in short we also call it as POSH Act, came into force, the Supreme Court Bench of India has said that there are serious lapses and uncertainty regarding its implementation. So therefore, from our examinations perspective, we need to deal with certain dimensions related to this particular act. For example, what was the background in which this act was passed? What are the features of this POSH act? What are various issues involved and what are the way aheads? So that is why in today's session we will discuss this act in huge detail. So first let us look at the background. So basically the movement started in 1992 when a lady named Bhanwari Devi was gang raped in the state of Rajasthan, and various civil activists came in support of Bhanwari Devi and protested against this heinous crime. The case approached the Supreme Court, and after 5 years in 1997, the Supreme Court came up with certain recommendations, certain guidelines which need to be followed at the workplaces. These guidelines were known as Vishakha guidelines, very important thing. So Supreme Court said that until and unless the Parliament comes up with certain law, till that time these Vishakha guidelines have to be implemented at all the workplaces in order to protect the right to equality and right against gender discrimination for the women at the workplaces. Then as a follow-up, after 10 years in 2007, a bill was introduced in the parliament, which after certain debates, certain amendments, in 2013 was passed as the act which today we call as the POSH Act, that is Prevention of Sexual Harassments at the Workplace Act. So now let us see that what are the key features of this particular act. First of all, we should understand that what is the aggrieved woman, who are the aggrieved women. This act is a very holistic act and covers almost every woman who is working, which means the working women, those women who are visiting the workplace. So it is very important that this act is not only applicable to the women who are working in an institution, but also to those women who are not working in those institutions but are visiting those institutions, as well as the students. This act is applicable over the formal sectors as well as the informal sectors. So that is why the act covers domestic workers, regular, temporary, ad hoc or daily wages, voluntary basis, employed directly or through the agents, contract workers, probationers, trainees, apprentice, called by any such names. So basically it tries to cover almost every woman who are directly or indirectly associated with some type of workplace. Now what are workplaces? Again, these workplaces are also very broad in this act. It includes the government organization, NGOs, nursing homes, corporations, houses, companies, farms also important, educational institutions, sports facilities. This is very important because we all are aware about the ongoing wrestlers protests. Then hospitals, service providers as well as cooperative societies. So these are the aggrieved women and these are the workplaces which are covered under this act. Now the question arises that how does this act defines the sexual harassment? So again, this act has taken a very broad approach. It is not restricted only to the physical context. Obviously, the physical context are the sexual harassments, but it is not limited to it. It also covers all those unwelcomed acts which directly or indirectly are having a nature of force. For example, demand for sexual favors in return of some things, for example, promotion, transfers, etc. It also covers sexual remarks. It also covers making someone to view pornographic videos forcefully. It also covers verbal as well as non-verbal abuses as well as sexual remarks. So basically not just the physical contact but the other intangible things which are of sexual nature are covered under this Sexual Harassment Act, and that is why it is said that this act is very progressive in nature. Now, what are the different responsibilities laid down under this act? 1. The employer is under a mandatory provision to construct the ICC. ICC basically stands for Internal Complaints Committee. So basically, internal complaints committee are the internal to the institutions or the workplaces. So whosoever the employer is, he or she shall constitute the internal complaints committee at his or her workplace, and 50% of the seats of these complaints committee shall be reserved for the women. Next, when it comes to the district administration, the district officer must constitute a local complaint committee at the district level, and if he or she feels so, it can also be constituted at the block level. All these local complaint committees shall have the power of civil code. Further, there are time-bound procedures in which all the complaints must be addressed. If there is some kind of non-compliance, a fine of rupees 50,000 will be levied on the employer or the organization. So these are certain key facts which are mentioned in the POSH Act 2013 to prevent the sexual harassments of the women at the workplaces. But then there are certain issues involved. So let us now look at those issues. The first and the foremost issue is, as we all know, that the laws are there on the papers, but when it comes to the implementation, the laws are hardly implemented on ground. So in the same manner, this act is also not implemented in letter and spirit. For example, there are several institutions which have not constituted their own internal complaints committee, and several data suggest that, for example, if we take the example of sports federations, because this is the issue which is there in current affairs also. So out of around 30 sports federations, only 16 federations have constituted the ICC. That means around 50% of the bodies of the sports federations do not have ICC at all. Further, in those institutions where the ICCs have been constituted, there is an improper constitution. For example, the seats which were reserved for women are not actually occupied by the women. The legal members are not there, despite the fact that the local complaint committee have the power of the civil court. They have the legal authority. The members of the complaint committees also have the legal authority, but the issue is that there are no legal members in those committees. Further, when it comes to the ICC, that is Internal Complaint Committee, the members are nominated by the employer. So if the employer is nominating the member of the Internal Complaints Committee, then there are high chances of conflict of interest. Further, the third challenge is of no accountability. The Act is not very clear that whose specific responsibility is the implementation of the overall Act. For example, yes, in the organization it is the responsibility of the employer. At the district level, it is the accountability of the district officer. But who is the overall authority? What is the grievance redressal mechanisms? Whom to approach in case there is a non-compliance? So there are certain lacunas in this aspect. Further, despite the fact that the Act is applicable to the informal sector, but it is seen that almost 90% of the cases arise from the informal sector, but they are hardly reported. The rights of the women in the informal sector are grossly violated, and women, because in the informal sector, are not very educated, they are not aware about their rights, and that is why this informal sector sees the gross violation of this particular act. There is no significant and authenticated data regarding the implementation of these apps. Then there are certain social challenges also, and these challenges always remain, and that is why it is said that for the social problem, only the legal solutions cannot provide a way ahead. So legal solution must also be accompanied with the social reforms, because you yourself imagine that if there is an organization there, we have the internal complaints committee which has the women, which also is working very efficiently, but until and unless the women at the social level do not get the support, they will not register the case, because in such type of cases even the family members do not support the women. So that is why these social challenges also exist. Then there is a huge digital divide, and this divide increases when it comes to the women, especially belonging to the rural areas or other backward areas. So yes, government has taken several steps to report such cases. For example, government had come up with the She Box initiative. But the thing is that if there is a huge digital divide, then how such e-based governance models can be tapped to their fullest potential? So therefore, these are certain issues associated with this particular act. And in this regard, we shall understand that what can be a way ahead. First is empowering the National Commission for Women with power to summon the people and carry out independent investigations, impose fines, search and seizure in matters of sexual harassment at the workplaces. Second, there should be a continuous awareness and sensitization drives regarding this particular acts, its provisions and the grievance redressal mechanisms for the females in schools, in college curriculums, etc. Discussions should be organized by the civil society on regular basis. Then special attention should be given towards the sectors where women are most vulnerable, for example the garment sectors, domestic helps and workers, etc. Further, this law must be modified and it should be made gender neutral, because sexual harassment cases do not just are against the women, but they are also against the transgenders as well as men. So therefore this act should be made as gender neutral. Further, a nationwide audit of the functioning of the Internal Complaints Committee must be conducted. The same audit must be there also for the Local Complaints Committee, and a separate budget must be earmarked for this. Therefore, there are certain changes which are proposed in the law. 1. Removal of the penalty for false complaints. If there are acts with good intention, then it is also the responsibility of the policy makers that that act must not become the tool to be misused. Further, removal of a need for conciliation between the complainant and respondent, because in the act it has been provided that there are certain procedures which are to be followed before forwarding the complaint to the Local Complaints Committee by the ICC, and there lies the chances of negotiation. So that must be eradicated. Further, the Local Complaints Committee must be decentralized, which means that they should be constituted at the block or the tehsil level and not just at the district levels. The Justice Verma Committee noted that ICC system should be replaced by Employment Tribunal, as dealing with such complaints in-house could discourage the women from coming out, and this is very obvious. So these are certain measures which you can write in your mains answer as your suggestions to further improve this particular act. So this topic was pretty lengthy and also very important, and hence we will revise this topic in brief once again. So this topic has appeared at the text and the context page. We saw that in which context this topic has appeared. Then we looked at the background, that it was in 1992 when the Bhanwari Devi was gang raped, and then came the Vishakha guidelines which later took the form of the POSH Act in 2013. there were certain important features of this particular act. For example, it tries to holistically cover every type of women who are directly or indirectly associated with some workplaces. It also covers the informal sectors like domestic workers, contract workers, employed workers through some agents, etc. Similarly, it also take workplaces also holistically, taking the formal as well as informal sectors, dealing with government organizations, NGOs, houses, companies, service providers, sports facilities, cooperative societies, etc. The sexual harassment definition of this term is also very broad, which covers the direct physical context as well as the indirect verbal or non-verbal abuses, sexual remarks, showing pornographic videos forcefully, etc. And therefore it lies certain responsibilities on the employer to constitute ICC, on the district officer to constitute LCC, and the penal provisions in terms of fine for the non-compliance. But then after all these provisions, there are certain issues associated. For example, lack of ICC in several institutions, improper constitution, lack of accountability, informal sectors, huge digital divide, high social challenges, as well as the lack of data. In this regard, in the last, we looked at certain way ahead in terms of empowering the National Commission for Women, generating the awareness regarding this act, special attention to those areas where the women are most vulnerable, for example, domestic help, reforming the laws and making it gender neutral, nationwide auditing. Further, there are changes proposed also related to the penalty for the false complaints, removal for a need of conciliation between the complainant and respondent, decentralizing of the local complaint committees, as well as replacing the ICC with the Employment Tribunal as recommended by Justice Verma Committee. This topic has appeared at page number 1. The topic is in relation to the Adani Hindunberg case, and the topic reads, SEBI denies probing Adani since 2016, and this is the very context of this article. Now this article today we are going to discuss within the context of General Studies Mains Paper 4, that is Ethics, in the form of case study. So now if you go by the previous year question paper analysis, you will see that in almost every case study, the ethical issues are asked, that what are various ethical issues involved in any particular case. And even if it is not specifically asked, you need to be aware about the ethical issues, because only then you can write about the solutions which need to be taken in order so that these things do not repeat in future. So let us discuss this from the ethical perspective and not from the legal perspective. First of all, let us understand the context. Basically, SEBI in Supreme Court has said that they were not investigating the Adani Group since 2016, because there were several reports which claimed that Adani Group was being investigated by SEBI since 2016, and despite this, there were gross amount of irregularities on the hands of Adani Group, and still SEBI didn't point out. So in this regard, SEBI has said that they were not investigating them. But on the contrary, there were statements by certain ministers in the parliament that SEBI was investigating the group. So yes, there still exists a confusion on this issue. However, whenever there are confusions, there are certain ethical issues involved too. So today we are discussing certain ethical issues involved in this Adani Hindunberg report case. First ethical issue is of the poor corporate governance. Now this topic is explicitly mentioned in a syllabus of ethics paper also, and it is also one of the ethical issues, because there was a poor corporate governance on the hands of Adani Group, and that is why there was lack of transparency in the financial matters. Now an important principle of the corporate governance is the transparency, and because it is a corporate governance, so transparency of financial matters become really important, but it was not there, and that is why the Hindunberg report has claimed that several stock prices were manipulated to a higher levels. Second ethical issue is that for the ends, certain means were compromised, because illegal means were used to manipulate the stock prices. Within a very short span of time, there was a high accumulation of wealth. So that is why, in order to attain higher profits, that is the end in itself, the means which were used were not at all ethical, and this also goes against the Gandhian principles, because Mahatma Gandhi has said that means cannot justify the ends. Let us move towards the third ethical issue involved, that is the environmental degradation. So, from the environmental perspective, also, when we have to analyze that Adani's group's economic activities have degraded the environment directly or indirectly. Now, here you have to understand that there can be a counter argument that because it was an economic activity, so obviously there will be certain environmental degradation and environmental clearances must have been taken. But the thing is that here we are discussing only the issues involved. So, yes, environmental degradation is also one of the major issues. Next is the maligning of the image of the country. So, whenever such corporate frauds occur on such large scales, it is not only bad for the domestic economy, it also undermines the country's credibility to regulate its corporate sphere beyond the domestic borders also. So that is why this issue has maligned the image of India in the foreign land. It has shaken the confidence of the investors community. Next issue is of lack of independence of institutions. That why it was so that SEBI, if it is saying that it was not investigating, why it was not investigating? How come the Hindenburg report came out with certain findings which are at all unethical, but our domestic regulator was not aware about it? Why there was a deliberate delay in the investigations of this corporate fraud? All these things show that there was a huge corporate political nexus and the institutions are not independent in our country. The last issue is related to the exploitation and inequality. We all know that the wealth of the Adani group, the owner as well as company, has increased tremendously. But do we really know that in the same proportion, let's say the salaries of the workers have increased in that company? No. And that is why it says that there is a huge inequality. And also we all are aware about the Oxfam report also. So Oxfam report has already claimed that top 1% of the population claims more than 75% of the wealth. So isn't this true within the Adani group also? This disproportionate rise of the wealth of few people points out toward rising inequality and exploitation. So these are certain ethical issues which are involved in this particular case and will help you to answer your case studies or to analyze your case studies if at all it comes for this particular case or for the larger case which involves the corporate governance. This topic has appeared at text and context page and it is in relation to the Adhar enabled payment system AEPS transaction model. So this topic is mainly relevant from the prelims examinations perspective. That is why we will be discussing this topic in very short so that you are able to attempt the prelims question based on it. And to answer the prelims question, the important dimensions related to this is that what do you exactly mean by AEPS and what are its key features. So that is why we shall understand the key facts related to AEPS. First of all, let us see that how presently the transaction models work. For example, let's say this is an ATM. You go to the ATM, you insert your debit card and you withdraw certain cash. The factor of authentication which you provide here is the OTP PIN. Similarly, when you transact at any shop, so there is a point of sale machine. You enter your debit card, you enter your OTP PIN and then the transaction is made. Similarly, if you are, let's say, shopping on the e-commerce website, there also you enter your card details and then the OTP comes to your mobile phone, you enter that OTP and then the transaction is made. However, let's say your ATM card is lost and also your phone is lost. So now don't you think that these two things, if lost and if found by someone else, it can be misused to withdraw your money? So that is why in order to tackle these challenges, Aadhaar enabled payment system came. Now, this system is based on two-factor authentication. So it is basically a financial transaction method through the Adhar based authentication at the point of sale devices or the micro ATMs. Basically, your Adhar data has your biometric details. For example, your fingerprints, your iris scan, etc. So customers can use their biometric data, which will fetch their Adhar detail or Adhar number. So these are two-factor authentication there in the AEPS system. So with the help of these biometric authentication methods, the customers can use their Adhar number to access various banking services including cash withdrawals, balance inquiries, fund transfer, etc. So now you need not to carry your debit card with you. The only thing which you need is the Adhar card. This system is being introduced by National Payment Corporation of India, and basically it is introduced to promote financial inclusion and make the banking services accessible to all. So that is where lies the benefits of AEPS. One obviously is the financial inclusion. For those people who do not have access to the traditional banking services can now take the advantage of the banking services through their just the Aadhaar card. Second, it is also helpful in streamlining the government entitlements, for example, Narega, Social Security pension, other old age pensions, etc. Because now the government has the Aadhaar number and the amount can directly be transferred to the bank account. The thing is that your bank accounts should be linked with the Aadhaar as well as with the phone. And obviously Aadhaar should also be linked with the phone. So basically all these things are linked together, and that is why the government entitlements will be streamlined in a better manner. Next is the convenience, because it allows the users to carry out the financial transactions using the Aadhaar number and biometric authentication. It eliminates the need for carrying cash or debit card, etc., which we have discussed. It also increases the security because it is based on the biometric authentication. Your fingerprints cannot be replicated. However, yes, there are certain instances whereby the cyber fraudsters are using the silicon to replicate your fingerprints. But yes, more or less, this is more secured compared to the traditional transaction methodologies. It is also low cost, and that is why it makes affordable option for individuals who want to carry out financial transactions. It is also easy to use because no technical knowledge is required to use your fingerprints or to give your iris scan. It is also interoperable in nature. It facilitates interoperability across all the banks in safe and secured manner. And this model enables the banks to expand the financial services to the unreached clients beyond their branch networks, as beneficiaries of the business correspondents are mostly located at unbanked and underbanked areas. So basically, the point is financial inclusion plus security. So these two are the important benefits or objectives of the Aadhaar based enabled payment system transaction model. This topic has appeared at page number 5 in today's The Hindu Daily edition. The immediate context of this very topic is political, and that is why not very relevant from our examinations perspective. But in this topic, this particular term, Vokkaliga, is very important. And this term is important not from the polity section but from the perspective of culture section. So that is why today, from the prelims examinations perspective, we should look that what are the key facts related to this particular sect, that is Vokkaligas, and how these Vokkaligas are different from Virshaivs. So that is why in today's session we will be discussing with these two things. First, we will discuss about the Virshaivs. So this sect was founded by Basava, and this person was the prime minister during the reign of Kalachuri dynasty, and specifically during the king Bijala I in Karnataka. So Basava was the person who was the prime minister of Bijala who founded this particular sect known as Virshaivs. They are also known as the Lingayat sects. The basic principles which Basava advocated was equality of all the human beings irrespective of their caste, gender, sect, religion, etc. Further, He also advocated that all the forms of manual labor are equally important. He also considered wearing of Ishtling. Ishtling basically is a necklace with a pendant that contains the small Shiva ling. So he considered wearing of Ishtling as an important practice for the Virshaivs or the Lingayats. And that is why Basava is also known by the name Ishtling. So there are certain key facts which are related to Lingayatism or the Vaishyavism. So you might have seen the previous year questions in the UPSC prelims examination whereby they ask certain key terminologies which are there in the history or the culture section, that is from the ancient or the medieval history. So that is why here also there are certain key terminologies which are associated with Lingayats. First is the Anubhav Mantapa. Now, this Anubhav Mantapa was the first parliament in the history of mankind ever organized. So, remember this particular word. Now, because we are dealing with the historical topics, so obviously most of the things are factual in nature, and that is why you have to memorize them. Anubhav Mantapa, this you can relate with a Hindi word that is mandap, and you can connect it with some association of the people which is also known as the parliament. Now, all the recordings of this parliamentary proceedings or the Anubhav Mantapa were recorded in the form of Vachan literature. Now, Vachan in Hindi is related to the Vakya, that is, speak. So, whatever was spoken in this Anubhav Mantapa, it was recorded in the form of Vachan literature. Next important term is Kayaka. Now, Kayaka denotes the manual labor. So Kayaka meant that every person has to work for his or her living, and that has to be with the divine mindset. That is the mind which is free from corruption, which is free from any ill will. So that is why Kayaka denotes working for the survival with the divine mindset. And then all the earnings which you get by working for your survival, a part of that earning must be given for the welfare of the poor, which were known as dasuha. Again, an important term. Now, this concept is very much common across various religions as well as sects. That is, whatever you earn, a part of that money must be given for the welfare of the poor people. The followers of these Lingayat beliefs were also known as Sharanas, and the preachers of this Lingayat faith were known as Jangamas. So again, I am repeating this thing. Founder of the Virshaiv was Basava. He was the prime minister during Kalachuri dynasty during the kingship of Baijala I. Basava advocated equality and also considered wearing of Ishtling as an important practice. Anubhav Mantapa related to the first parliament. Vachan literature were the recordings of Anubhav Mantapa. Kayaka was the work which you do for your survival. The Suha was the part of that total earning which you give to the poor people. Shranas are the common followers of Lingayat beliefs, and Jangamas are the preachers of the Lingayat faith. Now come to Vokkaligas. Now these Vokkaligas are primarily located in the southern Karnataka region, especially during the Mysore dynasty. So by profession, they were warriors as well as cultivators. Actually, this word Vokkaligas has been made out of a word known as Vokku. Vokku is a terminology related to the grain cultivators. So that is why they were warriors as well as cultivators. And because they were also warriors, so they had a huge dominance in the old Mysore kingdom. Dominance in terms of money, in terms of power, in terms of politics, as well as in terms of demography. An important fact is that Kempe Gowda I, who was the founder of Bangalore, was a member of this very community. They have produced many princely families like Vadiyars of Mysore. However, the progress in the sphere of general education was gradual. This prompted the Vokkaliga community's leaders to organize an association which was supported by then Diwan of Mysore VP Madhava Rao. And this association was formed finally in 1906 by the name Vokkaligar Sangh. an important word, that is Vokkaligas found in 1906. So these were certain key facts from the historical perspective related to the Virshaivs as well as Vokkaligas. So this last topic has appeared at page number 12. The topic reads, One-Stop Centers for Zero Waste to be launched in cities. So basically, again, this topic is also relevant from the prelims examinations perspective because there are certain key facts related to this topic under this article. Basically, these will be known as the RRR centers, that is reduce, reuse and recycle centers. And these centers, these one-stop centers will be set up as a part of a nationwide campaign known as Meri Life Mera Swachh Shahar. And this campaign is basically under the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0. And the main aim of these centers will be, see, first you think that what is the biggest challenge when it comes to the waste management in India? Yes, there are several challenges, but out of all those challenges, the most important challenge is that we do not segregate our waste. There is informal sector, so we do not know most of the time that where to discard this waste and all other related issues. So why not to establish one-stop centers where we can go and just give our waste to those centers, and then all the later tasks are performed by those centers only. So that is what these centers will do. However, from the mains examinations perspective, you need to analyze the waste management issues in India. And for this, I request you to go back to the DNS dated 15th March 2023. Whereby the waste generation in India is discussed in very detail. There are several challenges when it comes to the waste generation in India. For example, the huge amount and the sheer quantity of the waste which are generating, the low processing efficiency, lack of segregation, that is higher heterogeneity of the wastes, further open waste disposals, lower technology utilization and poor law enforcement. In this DNS, I have also discussed that what is the landfill, what is this concept and how this landfill can create several challenges, for example fires, groundwater contamination, etc. In the same DNS dated 15th March 2023, we have also discussed in detail that what can be other suggestions in order to manage waste effectively in India. These suggestions can be from the spheres of technological integration, landfill capping, various waste management policies, waste management campaigns, etc. So, from the mains perspective, this topic should be looked from the DNS dated 15th March 2023. And that was all for today. All the very best and study hard.